Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's semi-final debate. My name is Helena Nguyen and I am the chairman of this debate. The timekeeper is Georgia Tan. This debate will be judged by a panel of 3 adjudicators who are Mr. Harsalides, Ms. Harana and Ms. Hale. The topic of this debate is that reservoirs in South Australia should be opened for recreational activities. The affirmative team seated to my right is from St. Dominic's Priory College. The negative team seated to my left is from Pembroke. The speaking time for this debate is 4 minutes. A single warning bell will sound 1 minute before the speaking time, and a double bell will sound at the speaking time. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off. I declare this debate open and call upon the first affirmative speaker, Anya Arakapudi.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that reservoirs in South Australia should be open for recreational activities. We define the topic as a reservoir being a natural or artificial lake where water is stored before being filtered and transported. Specifically, we would like to say that this includes the land around the water. South Australia, being a state, comprising the central southern part of Australia, and opened, meaning allowing access, passage or view through an empty space. Recreational activities, being actions completed for leisure during discretionary time, including canoeing, fishing, cycling and running. All these definitions are derived from the Oxford Dictionary. We, the affirmative team, believe that this statement is true. As first speaker, I'll be talking to you about how these reservoirs can bring major economic benefits to South Australia. My second point is about how they can also significantly increase the amount of tourism, increasing revenue for nearby towns. And my final point is how this permission can open various employment and investment opportunities. Our second speaker will be speaking about the numerous family experiences that await you. She will also talk about the continuous success of these reservoirs since being opened. Our third speaker will rebut and sum up our team's case. My first point is that these reservoirs can become economically beneficial. As Premier Steve Marshall has advertised, it would be a big loss to South Australia to keep these reservoirs closed and only use them for one purpose. These open and scenic landscapes can quite easily be converted into family-friendly weekend getaways while still being used for their main purpose of storing water. A practical direction to be going. This would save the government millions of dollars set aside to improve the recreation in South Australia. These reservoirs, if opened, will also bring money to the government. This leads me to my second point, about how permitting recreational activities at reservoirs will significantly increase their popularity among tourists. Increase in tourism will also bring an increase in revenue to nearby towns. An example of this is the Myponga Reservoir that was visited by 4,600 people within the first month of being opened, as stated by the advertiser. Minister of Environment, David Spears, has said that with weekly markets, local stores and artisan brewery, all in a nearby area, providing a new tourism draw card at the reservoir is driving more dollars into Myponga businesses. Supporting this example, owners of the Myponga General Store, Vicky and Kevin Addington, said they've also noticed an uplift in customers since the reservoir's opening. As stated on the Premier's website, reservoirs being located in regional areas means that they will bring tourists away from the city and bring revenue not only to the reservoir, but also to nearby businesses. My final point is that opening reservoirs in South Australia increases employment and investment opportunities. Regional reservoirs, such as Barossa Valley and Port Pirie, increase investment and employment areas. These include cafes, bakeries, and other common services. There are also employment opportunities in the development of infrastructure, such as walking trails and car parks. Jorah Myers from abcnews.com found that there were currently numerous engineering roles needed at reservoirs in SA, a confirmation that employment will increase upon opening these reservoirs. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, not only will these reservoirs benefit our state economically, but will also do their part in supporting small nearby businesses by becoming top tourist attractions. Opening reservoirs is the immediate solution to South Australia's current problem for lack of employers, by creating more investment and employment opportunities. Thank you.
I call upon the first negative speaker, Alice Quinn.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that reservoirs in South Australia should be open for recreational activities. We agree with the definition given by the affirmative team. However, we, the negative team, know that this statement is false. Today's first speaker, I will be clearly explaining to you about the risk of water contamination and also the importance of conserving our primary drinking water source. Our second speaker will be explaining that opening reservoirs to the public will amount to great costs and bills for the taxpayer and that opening reservoirs in South Australia will interfere with the maintenance of our reservoirs. Our third speaker will rebut and sum up our team case. The other team has tried to tell you that allowing the public into reservoirs will boost tourism, which will make money for South Australia. This is incorrect because the amount that the government will be spending on building public facilities will not be worth the small amount of money which is made from the reservoir. Additionally, tourism only contributes to 3% of the nation's economy and is therefore not worth spending that much money on. There are also a number of alternative destinations that the public or tourists may choose to visit, such as regional beaches. So why waste our money and risk our health and safety by opening reservoirs when we already have these beautiful and popular beaches that we should be spending the effort to improve? The other team has also tried to tell you that the reservoir is a great place for family fun activities. This point is clearly invalid as there are multiple of suitable places in South Australia. The other team have said that reservoirs not only can be used for water sports, but can be also used for running and walking tracks. Well, there are multiple of exercise tracks which can be used throughout South Australia, not to mention South Australia beautiful beaches which are perfect for water sports. Opening the reservoirs' public enjoyment is completely unnecessary and put our drinking water at risk. Today, I'll be discussing 2 points. Now to my first point. The state government's plan to open up reservoirs for recreational activities will put South Australia's drinking water at risk of contamination and risking an outbreak of respiratory and gastrointestinal illnesses. According to the ABC, an independent annual report finalised in April revealed SA Water could breach Australian drinking water guidelines if metropolitan reservoirs were opened by the end of 2019. According to SA Water, our reservoirs are South Australia's primary water storage areas, and at full capacity, our reservoirs can hold almost 200,000 megalitres of water. This equates to just under a year's supply for metropolitan Adelaide. If this water were to be contaminated, then how else are we going to keep up with our growing demand? According to Vestigard, water-related diseases cause 3.4 million deaths each year, and these are primarily consequences of drinking contaminated water, so the introduction to recreational activities will only raise this figure. Now to my second point, which is the importance to conserve our primary source of drinking water. As previously mentioned, our reservoirs are South Australia's primary water storage areas, and if contaminated by certain pollutants, our state would have to rely heavily on other sources such as the Murray. For example, according to the Bureau of Meteorology, the 2000s Australian drought placed extreme pressure on agricultural production and urban water supply in much of southern Australia. So if one of our major sources of water was to be affected by contamination, we will need to rely heavily on the Murray, which may not adjust to our abrupt needs. The other obvious option would be desalination plants. However, according to Hydro Definity, desalination plants are exorbitantly expensive, requires large amounts of energy, and is environmentally damaging by disposing waste straight into the ocean. According to a report from Pacific Institute, desalination plants on average use about 15,000 kilowatt hours of power for every million gallons of fresh water that's produced. And these high energy requirements raise concerns about emissions for our planet. Is this really what we're going to have to turn to? So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we certainly without a doubt know that reservoirs in South Australia should not be open for recreational activities, for reasons of putting South Australia's drinking water at risk of water contamination and outbreaks of illnesses, and also the importance of conserving South Australia's primary source of drinking water. Do you really want the reason our world is being destroyed so rapidly to be you having fun in our reservoirs? Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Maddie Dungy.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that reservoirs in South Australia should be open for recreational activities. As the affirmative team, we believe this statement to be undeniably true. Now to my rebuttals. The first negative speaker has attempted to tell you that why should we use reservoirs as recreational venues when beaches should be improved using money. This is incorrect because, as our first speaker mentioned, reservoir recreation draws tourism and therefore money to regional areas, which increases revenue there in addition to beaches, which are already being destroyed as evident in littering and the lack of sand dune systems. The first negative speaker has also attempted to validate the idea of contamination in reservoir water if used for recreation. This is utterly false because the structure of a reservoir decontaminates the water after it leaves it. Not only this, but it is evident in multiple websites that SA Water, the company in charge of reservoir open hours, takes regular water checks to ensure the water is not contaminated. In the extremely unlikely event of contamination to occur, SA Water will, according to their website, take immediate action by either closing off the area that has been contaminated or the whole reservoir completely. So, when you look at this from a logical perspective, not only will the water go through decontamination processes after it leaves the reservoir, but a whole company dedicated to the safety levels of our water undergo water checks that ensure it is safe. Our first speaker has already spoken about the massive tourism increase that will come from opening South Australian reservoirs, the various economic benefits from utilising reservoirs for multiple purposes, and employment and investment opportunities. As second speaker, I will be speaking to you about the family experiences available at an open reservoir, and I will also talk about the success of reservoirs that have already been open and available for recreation. My first point is that there are many family-friendly experiences that come from enabling public access to South Australian reservoirs. They hold opportunities for people to see native animals and plants, picnic on the banks, and appreciate the scenery. The South Australian Minister for Water and Environment, David Spears, stated that South Australian reservoirs will give people the opportunity to enjoy the area's natural beauty. He also quoted, "We're looking at a hierarchy of activities occurring at different sites, and we are confident this will engage the community." In an interview conducted by Google Reviews, visitors of the Myponga Reservoir were asked their opinion on the location. One tourist stated, "The reservoir's view in its own right was definitely worth the journey." According to the Department of Environment and Water, the Myponga Reservoir's surrounding forests hold more than 120 bird species and a variety of native animals to enjoy. This leads me to my second point, that there are an abundance of reservoirs already open for recreational activities. These reservoirs are successful in not only cleanliness, but revenue and wildlife preservation, according to the South Australian Department of Environment and Water. The department also states on their webpage that there is a 3.3 kilometre trail which is ideal for walking and running, and there's room for families to enjoy a picnic or head to the lookout to take in the scenic surrounds. These, as well as other South Australian reservoirs, have had no issues of any sort becoming available to the public, so there will be absolutely no point in either closing them or restricting public access. The Atkinson Dam, located in southeast Queensland, is a successfully public reservoir located outside of South Australia and is a prime example of why reservoirs should be open to the public. With a caravan park, various waterfront views, a canoe hire and fishing locations, this reservoir has proved why reservoirs should be recreational. South Australia should continue to follow in the footsteps of reservoirs such as the Atkinson Dam to enable a stable success rate. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we firmly believe it is the correct thing to do to open South Australian reservoirs for recreational activities. Memories can be created with family, and the success rate of previous South Australian reservoirs should not be ignored. As Confucius once wrote, "There is beauty in everything, but not all see it." Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Lauren Hepworth.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that reservoirs in South Australia should be open for recreational activities. We, the negative team, believe that this statement is false. The affirmative team has attempted to convince you that the water is treated so it would be safe to drink. This is false because according to ResearchGate, treatment plants are not 100% reliable, and even when working, they serve to reduce, not to remove, pathogens and other contaminations. The more contamination that treatment plants are required to manage, the higher the cost of treatment and potentially the higher the amount of contamination that remains in the treated water that reaches the consumers. And where are they going to find all the money for filtration, as well as the staff to police the water? It isn't worth getting an unreliable filtration system just so we can play in our main water source. This just isn't a viable option. The affirmative team has attempted to persuade you that many other reservoirs have been successfully opened. This may be true, but that means that we can't afford to open up anymore, as we are the driest state in the driest country. We need all the usable water we can get. It is different in other places as they have more rainfall and a larger water supply than us. If already some of our water supply is being used for recreation, then surely that is enough, along with beaches, pools and rivers, and we don't need to open up any more reservoirs for recreational use. Our first speaker has talked about the high risk of water contamination and the importance of water conservation. Today, I will be bringing your attention to the fact that the public partaking in recreational water sports will interfere with the maintenance of the reservoir, and how opening reservoirs will bring great costs and water bills. Now to my first point, that opening reservoirs to the public will amount to great costs and bills for a taxpayer. According to the ABC News, South Australia already has the highest water bills in the whole country. Allowing our reservoirs for recreational use will only add to these costs. Many new facilities to accommodate to the visitors will have to be built, such as public restrooms, car parks, park benches and rubbish bins, the costs of which will all add up. According to a report from the Adelaide City Council, it costs $250,000 for just one two-stall toilet block. These costs would be added to South Australians' already high water bills. We can't forget about the cost which comes with installing a better filtration system, which will be needed if water sports are commencing in the reservoir, and not to mention the high level of security which will have to be installed to ensure that South Australia's drinking water isn't at risk from terrorism threats. SA's previous Environment Minister, Ian Hunter, described the reservoir plans as an expensive joke. He said, the government needs to make dramatic cuts to maintain budget for the amount of spending he has already announced, so I think South Australians will want to know exactly what he is going to cut. The decision to open reservoirs was reckless, and the costs and bills must be taken into consideration, which they were not. Now to my second point. The opening reservoirs in South Australia will interfere with the maintenance of the reservoirs. Our first speaker has already explained that clean drinking water is the main importance of a reservoir. In order to keep the water inside the reservoir clean, multiple chemicals are needed. According to SA Water, the water from the reservoir is put through treatment, then disinfection, and lastly chlorine residual maintenance, which manages hazards in the water. With water sports commencing in the reservoir, it is creating more and more hazards, which then need to be removed from the water. According to a literature review on ResearchGate, boat activity along the shoreline causes bank erosion, and the movement of boats through the water stirs up fine sediments from the bottom of the reservoir that decrease the water clarity, which ultimately results in more filtration to remove sediments and more maintenance on the reservoir. As I've previously said, multiple features would have to be built, such as a facility to hold cars. A car park would only risk the maintenance of the reservoir from petrol leaks and crashes. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, if we care about water supply and water costs, then surely the small benefits which come with public reservoirs are in no way worth the risk that we are creating. The decision to allow reservoirs for recreational use is reckless. Thank you.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Anushree Vora.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that reservoirs in South Australia should be open for recreational activities. We, the affirmative team, believe this statement is true. Now to our rebuttals. The first affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that using the water for the water sports is going to further contaminate the water. However, we can still use the reservoir for other activities such as hiking, cycling and running, as we clearly mentioned in our definition. The first speaker has said that allowing the public into the reservoirs will contaminate the water. This is incorrect. As quoted by the Liberal Party, we will ensure that the opening of each reservoir is undertaken with great care to prevent any possible adverse impacts on the quality and security of our drinking water supplies, as well as interstate and overseas. This has already been managed effectively here in South Australia, with a significant proportion of our drinking water coming from the River Murray, where many and varied recreational activities occur. In addition to this, regulations have been set in place by South Australian Government for our own sake, such as dogs not being permitted into the ground as they present a risk to the drinking water and local native animals. The first speaker has stated that reservoirs can create toxins that upset stomachs and skin rashes. This is false. The South Australian Government has stated that the water will be treated so that anybody conducting activities revolving around the water won't be injured. As a government, it is solely their responsibility they have accepted to ensure the safety of South Australian civilians, meaning that there will be no permitted activity that will intentionally try to hurt or harm anyone. The second negative speaker is trying to tell you that these reservoirs won't be maintained correctly. This is completely false, because the Premier Steve Marshall has made it evidently clear that upon opening these reservoirs, the government is taking on the responsibility to keep it in their best shape. This is clearly stated on the Liberal Party's website titled Strong Plan. The second negative speaker has stated that recreation can damage maintenance. This is wrong, because SA Water and the SA Government have clearly stated that they will be closing off any areas that have mechanical or operational equipment within them. They've already started this process with the Maiponga and Warren reservoirs. There are maps on their websites that show areas of the reservoirs that are not permitted for public access. The second negative speaker has tried to convince you that opening reservoirs isn't actually economically beneficial, but they are wrong, because economically beneficial means anything that will benefit our state's money, time or energy. Clearly, using this for more than one person is exactly this. Using this for more than one purpose is exactly this. Our first speaker spoke to you about how the reservoirs can bring major economic benefit to our state and how they can boost our tourism industry by miles. She also stated that the Maiponga Reservoir was visited by 4,600 people in just the first month, which is a huge benefit to our state and to local businesses. Our first speaker also said that opening reservoirs will boost employment and investment opportunities, which will definitely help us lower our current unemployment rate, which is at 6.8%. Our second speaker stated that having reservoirs will improve family time and help us enjoy our natural resources. She also stated that previously successful reservoirs have become a major tourist attraction. So in conclusion, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, our team firmly and strongly believes that reservoirs should be open for public recreation. And as John Seymour says, recreational opportunities are our biggest draw. We need to use our natural resources and play the cards that we have. Thank you.
I call upon the third negative speaker, Chloe Ciarangos.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that reservoirs in South Australia should be open for recreational activities. We, the negative team, are certain that this statement is in fact false. Now, throughout the entire case put forward by the affirmative team, only two main themes were actually presented. These themes were that we should put the resources we have to good use, and that opening reservoirs would have the potential to boost South Australian tourism. I will now disprove each of these themes, and in doing so, disprove their points and in result their team case. The first of the themes put forward by the affirmative team was that we should put our resources to good use. Although we do have the resources to let people come to reservoirs in South Australia, it is not necessarily a good idea to open them to the public. Firstly, this could be a very dangerous idea, for reasons such as tourists and locals drowning, terrorism threats to poison our water, which is our main water supply, and many other similar ideas too. Is it really considered a good idea to put tourists and the state's water supply in danger? Additionally, according to Oxford Academic, there are 337 species of animals calling South Australian reservoirs home. According to Britannica, human habitation is the most common cause of species going extinct. Given that there are only 8.7 million species, according to Live Science, and that 200 species are going extinct every single day, also according to Live Science, do we really want even more of our wildlife to become endangered or even extinct? Again, this does not exactly sound like we're making the most of our resources or like we're making this a good idea at all. Additionally, it's not worth a few extra jobs in regional areas to pollute our main water source and kill our beloved wildlife. These jobs can be created in the cities, where there will be more customers and more people that need employment than the regional country people, such as the city's large homeless population. Jobs in regional areas are not as important. The second affirmative speaker said that we should not use beaches as they already have been contaminated by the recreational activities. If this has happened to beaches that have been open for recreational activities, then why would we put our reservoirs in dangers of this happening to them as well? As the negative affirmative team themselves stated, then they will have to be shut down. Do we really want to risk shutting down our main water source just so people can have some fun? Additionally, the third speaker of the affirmative team stated that there will be nothing in the water that will try to hurt us. We do not think that the water chemicals are out there to get us, but they inevitably do present risks, as our negative speakers have stated. The second of the themes put forward by the affirmative team was that opening reservoirs for recreational activities will boost tourism in South Australia. This may seem like a valid argument, but if it is properly considered, it is evident that it is in fact untrue. Firstly, opening reservoirs will not necessarily boost the economy of South Australia. Our second speaker, Lauren, has already convinced you that this is an unnecessary cost for our state, but I will outline these points as well. According to the South Australian Government website, reservoirs.sa.gov.au, it costs approximately $600 million to open reservoirs to the public, as they are currently very dangerous. According to the South Australian Tourism Commission, the most South Australia has ever gained from tourism over 2 years is $3 billion, which is over 2017 and 2018. Given that this is a $1.5 billion a year at South Australia's very peak, spending $600 million on making reservoirs safe for people to do fun things in will not be worth it at all. It will also not add that much interest to tourism. Additionally, according to the Government of South Australia's website, tourism only contributes 3% of the national economy. If we want to invest in a big project, such as these reservoirs, we should not waste our money on tourism. We should spend it on something that contributes more greatly to the nation's economy. According to a study undertaken by L.J. Beverdorf at the study of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, beaches are the most preferred type of water-related tourist locations. This inevitably proves that opening reservoirs will not create much interest to tourists at all. If we were really thinking about tourism opportunities for our state, then we would invest in making beaches more attractive rather than spending a fortune just trying to make a couple of reservoirs safe for people to use for recreational activities. All in all, the cost is not worth the tourism benefits. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it should now be obvious to you that reservoirs in South Australia should not be open for recreational activities because our first speaker has stated this will risk water contamination and putting impurities in our primary water source, and because it will add to reservoir maintenance and how it will be very costly, as our second speaker, Lauren, has convinced you. I would like you to leave you with a commonly known fact. South Australia is the driest state in the driest country. If this is true, then why are we decided to give us our precious limited supply of drinking water for recreational activities? Thank you.